This is the terrifying story of the most contagious corpse in the world. It was February 1994 when 31-year-old Gloria Ramirez arrived at the Riverside General Hospital emergency room, gasping for air and clutching her stomach. Her heart was pounding against her ribs. This was the worst pain she'd ever felt. And as she looked down at her stomach, she saw a dark color seeping out of her, spreading like a bruise. And so, with terror gripping her soul, she cried out for help. But little did she know what would happen next. What happened to Gloria in the emergency room that night would not only put the lives of the hospital staff in danger, but would even make her body the most poisonous in the world. At first, doctors couldn't understand why Gloria had been given up on by her own family. She wasn't married, but she had 2 children who loved her very much and would never abandon her. And that's why it was a shock to everyone when they learned her family had brought her to the hospital at midnight, and then left without saying goodbye or asking how she was doing. Gloria was suffering from late-stage cervical cancer and had been receiving radiation treatment. Her doctor, Paul Anderson, had explained to her that there was no cure for her disease, and she would outlive more than a few months. And although he'd tried everything he could think of, her cancer had spread to her lungs and spine, leaving her in constant agony. Her time had come. That's why when she entered the emergency room that night, it was clear that she wouldn't survive. It was now February, and the hospital was busy. There were already several patients waiting to be seen. But when they heard that this woman was in extreme pain and in imminent danger of death, they quickly cleared the room and prepared themselves to save her life. She was taken into an isolated room and hooked up to a series of machines. Nurses drew samples of her blood and started in 4 while doctors worked tirelessly to ease her pain. But less than 10 minutes after she'd arrived at the hospital, something horrifying happened. While drawing Gloria's blood, the nurses noticed that her skin had developed an oily sheen and was also dark purple in some places. Her hair was also wet and greasy. They exchanged uneasy glances because they'd never seen anything like it before. Soon after, one of the nurses fainted dead away. At first, no one understood what had happened. It seemed unbelievable that such a healthy, strong woman could pass out simply from stress. But as soon as another nurse went to check on her and touched her shoulder, she too collapsed to the floor. It took a full minute for the other medical staff to realize what was happening. Someone had to call 911 immediately and alert the ambulance team that they should not under any circumstances touch the woman. As the ambulances rushed to the hospital, many of the staff began to feel nauseated. The smell of rotting flesh filled their nostrils, and they struggled to keep themselves from vomiting. To this day, nobody knows what that smell was, but some believe it was the devil's breath itself, sent to steal the souls of the unsuspecting. More and more staff members started collapsing, each one experiencing a different set of symptoms. Some fell to the ground paralyzed, while others lost consciousness and started foaming at the mouth. One even started convulsing and rolled her eyes completely back into her head. By the end of the night, 23 people had been affected, which included 4 doctors and 18 nurses. Only one doctor, Mark Depp, knew exactly what had happened. He rushed to help his colleague who'd been affected by whatever was coming off the woman, but he was too late. She had already passed away. And yet the horror was far from over. When he checked the woman's pulse, he realized that the dead patient was still affecting them. The woman's skin was still warm, and that meant that she was somehow emitting a heat that caused the people around her to pass out. The staff dropped everything and ran out of the building, away from the woman and whatever it was she was emitting. Some of the people who hadn't felt anything yet fell to their knees and vomited. Others simply walked away and never looked back. When paramedics arrived, they too felt the evil presence surrounding the room. They couldn't get close enough to check on the woman. And even though they wanted to, they couldn't risk being affected by whatever was inside the room. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Gloria Ramirez died just 45 minutes after arriving. But even in death, her body continued to wreak havoc on anyone who came near it. With no other option left, the hospital staff loaded her onto a gurney and pushed her through the emergency exit toward the ambulance. But they had forgotten one crucial detail. Along the way, the gurney had to pass through several other rooms, and one of those rooms was full of patients. Immediately upon entering the room, all of the patients fell to the ground and lost consciousness. The medical staff didn't know what to do. They were losing the fight against the mysterious force that seemed to be emanating from the corpse. In the end, the staff decided to evacuate all of the patients from the hospital and move them to another medical center several miles away. It was only then that they were able to load Gloria onto the ambulance and take her away. At this point, the staff began to wonder what kind of disease was affecting them so powerfully. Was it a virus? A bacteria? Maybe it was a toxin that the dead woman was emitting as her body decomposed. But what baffled them the most was that the woman had been dead for about half an hour. And normally, a body doesn't start to decompose for at least 2 or 3 days after death. As the sun rose the next morning, the hospital was still in chaos. People were everywhere on the ground, unable to move or speak. The hospital had to be evacuated and closed for the rest of the day, while workers sanitized every surface. Of the 23 people who'd become ill, 8 were still in the hospital days later, and 6 of them would never return to work. It was amazing that nobody died, but it was hard to say whether that was due to the quick reactions of the staff or something else. To this day, scientists have no idea what killed the nurses. They tested Gloria's body and found nothing that could explain what happened. Some believe that the nurses might have reacted badly to the strong concentration of DMSO in her body, but that theory was never proven. Her body was buried in a concrete vault beneath the earth, and the spot where she is buried is now a popular place for ghost hunters who want to test the limits of their equipment. For years afterwards, whenever a staff member from the hospital passed away, rumors would swirl that the person had been cursed by the toxic lady. And even today, doctors tell stories of the mysterious case of the hospital that couldn't save its patient. The case became so well known that a local high school made a movie about it, which was watched by millions of teenagers across the United States. The film changed the woman's name to Maria and gave her a backstory that would tug at the heartstrings of viewers. Although the real Maria Ramirez had no happy memories in her final days, the filmmakers decided to give their character a loving husband, a devoted son, and a daughter who visited her every single day. The movie is considered to be one of the best horror movies of recent times, and many viewers report that whenever they watch it, their lights flicker, their televisions turn off, and sometimes they hear footsteps behind them. Was there really a curse? Or was it just a coincidence? You decide.